Livelihoods are complex, but at the same time they can be simplified down to general terms about people's lived experience. So how people live, how they are able to use different resources to draw their living from. This may be natural resources such as the land, where they live in terms of the weather and what it can do in terms of growing their crops. It might also be the animals and resources that they have, technology, machinery, the knowledge and their labour. So within a household, how many people are there, how many men, how many women, and what skills and knowledge and jobs do they do. So it's the ways that people can construct a living. But it's also about the political connections that people have and the social ties that they have and how they establish that. So to have a secure and sustainable livelihood, particularly in connection with rural development and food security, it's very much about not just protecting people's assets, but proactively enhancing what people can do, building resilience into their livelihood.
Traditionally, the way of looking at households in Sub-Saharan Africa and their socioeconomic levels has been based on measures of income and measures of employment. When you put poverty into this picture, you realise that many households may not be formally employed or indeed have significant incomes. Therefore, livelihood becomes very important for looking at the range of activities that households endeavour to do. So livelihood is a way of capturing the activities that are done and who is doing them within a household, looking at the holistic picture of how people get by in life. So it's a much more holistic view at household and at community level of the different activities people are doing to make a living.
Sometimes when people talk about livelihoods, they talk about livelihood strategies. And there are three main types of livelihood strategy that exist. The first livelihood strategy is sometimes referred to as intensification. So this basically is where you try to produce more and more food or grow more and more crops more intensively on a particular area of land. A second key livelihood strategy or plan of action for livelihoods is what's referred to as livelihoods diversification. So this is rather than try to produce more intensely on a particular area of land, you try to do a larger number of different things to produce food. So as well as producing crops, you might have a small business as well on the side. And it's thought that if you are able to diversify your livelihoods, then your livelihoods become more resilient. They become more resistant to negative impacts, such as natural disasters, for example. The third type of livelihood strategy is what's referred to as migration. So clearly it's when people move from one place to another place to create a new living in that new location. And this is sometimes seen as a livelihood strategy of last resort. So if people are unable to diversify or unable to intensify their livelihoods, then they might migrate away from that area.
In terms of the household, people will experience different livelihood pathways. So, for example, you may have men in the household doing a different livelihood activity to women in the household. There may be cultural or constructural constraints about why that's the case. It may be in terms of land ownership or ability to do certain activities. It might be that you will also have concerns about who can access food, preferential consumption of food within the household. That can be divided by gender, age, and also there's a number of constraints that people have. So if you've got larger households, it may provide you with some opportunities, such as being able to diversify so you're better able to cope. But that doesn't necessarily mean all large households are going to be better off because there'll be more mouths to feed and more challenges in some cases.
I would say that food security has a profound impact on household level livelihoods in Sub-Saharan Africa. Let me illustrate that by giving you an example. If you have a household that's very food insecure and people don't have enough food to eat, then people often resort to what are referred to as coping mechanisms. These are short-term strategies that people have to survive. So a good example might be selling livestock. If your household suddenly comes under undue stress or faces some kind of shock or surprise, the levels of food security might be lowered in that house. As a response, what the head of the household might decide to do is to sell their cattle, for example. This will help the household to survive in the short term, but over the longer term, it might actually undermine their long-term livelihoods. Conversely, if a household has very good levels of food security, then basically it means they don't have to worry about finding enough food to eat. They can actually divert their attention, their resources into more productive activities, such as starting a small business, for example.